One problem that we have nowadays is that we can't find trees that are mature enough or big enough that we can get decent sized planking out of. So by the time we rip them all down, well, there's not enough of anything really. So we get plenty of these sizes, and what we need to do now is join them together. So I showed you in the previous session that Dowling was one of the methods that was used, and you have to get these holes very accurate, so when the dowel goes in, the other holes are corresponding to the dowels. So what we end up with is a piece twice as wide that is reasonably smooth, or rather even, but I can tell through the eyes in my fingertips, as it were. But as I said, fingertips, they see more than your eyes, because you have a better sense in your feeling. So it's a little bit off, and that was the problem with dowels. They had to be spot on to avoid any extra labour. And I'm going to show you what they used to use to get the two holes in the middle, called a dowel vise. So you have to adjust it to the width of the timber, and you tighten it to the timber, and then depending on the size of the dowel that you're using, obviously thicker timber has a bigger dowel, so you have a variety of bits that you can use. I've chosen this one here, which is the right size for the dowel that's going in there. Right, so this one here, that's the size of the dowel. So you pick the one that fits in here, lock it into place right against the edge, which is flush there, so that guarantees it's in the centre. And then that dowel goes in that hole. So for that you need a drill, which is again the same size as the actual dowel hole. And for that, usually you use a wood drill bit. It doesn't have a 45 or a 30 degree angle on it. It has outside tips that when they rotate, they cut the hole through the grain first before the actual drill bit does its thing. So it gives it a much cleaner hole rather than ripping it out of guts if you use a machining drill bit. So it has to have the tips on it, very similar to the spade bit that I showed you. So we put that in there. Right. And depending on the length of the dowel, you can put a piece of masking tape around the drill bit as a gauge, so you know you've gone the right depth and you don't go too far or not enough. So I'm just taking a guess. That'll be a 30mm dowel, so I'll have to go in 15mm at least. Take this out. Now there's my hole for the dowel, and when I knock it in, right, it'll slip nicely in there and then join up with the other one. Now, something about doweling you might want to know. Proper dowels that you buy at a hardware shop, they have flutes or grooves along them, so that when you glue them up and you push them into the hole, there is somewhere for the air in the hole to escape. So you're not pushing it in like a piston, and you get that resistance because the air is trapped in the hole. So get the right doweling with either multiple flutes, or you can get doweling in lengths that you cut yourself, and it has one groove all the way down the length. And that is sufficient to let the air out and any excess glue that might be in the hole. So very technical, but very functional. So I'll put glue on, slip it in, and then for the longer ones I use my rubber mallet, tap it in, and then wait for the glue to dry with the other one against it. So very time consuming, very accurate work required. So somebody came up with a brilliant idea. The biscuit tin. This is called the Biscuit machine. It's a very effective tool. I started using it in the mid-80s, and what it is, it's a blade that's mounted horizontally into a machine, and when I push the base down, the machine comes out and it makes a cut into the edge of your timber. So I'll give you a quick demo on this. So let's say we want to join these two sides together. So I'll make a mark there across it, and a mark there across it. So these are the corresponding edges, so I don't get them mixed up. And then what I do, I set the guard to a certain height. Which one is which? That one. So we don't get confused. I set the guard to the right depth. This is 19mm material. If your timber is 20, 30, whatever, you just set the guard higher up to make sure that the blade, when it comes out, hits the material right in the middle. So what I'll do now, I've got a little line here, a white line on the fence, which gives me the centre of the hole. Right, and I have a good grip on it. So what I've done, I've cut a hole or a curve in there, and it receives a biscuit. So that's why it's called a biscuit machine. So it's a piece of plywood that's specifically stamped out to the right thickness of the actual blade. And if the blade gets blunt or dull, then you have to change it, because as it wears down, the groove gets tighter and tighter, and you don't want to have to force these biscuits in, and then there's no room for movement. So you want to get the blade sharp, or have the blade sharp every time. So I'll do the other one on the white line, centre. You notice I went in a couple of times, even though I had drilled the groove already. What it does, it takes out all the sawdust that can get trapped in it. So we put the Biscuit in, right, and the other one in the other end, like so, in the centre, with glue of course, and also with glue. Glue is an adhesive, it is not a filler. So don't put too much glue along the edge and in the biscuit hole, because it'll only squash out when you clamp it and you'll waste it. And particularly PVA glue on raw timber will leave a stain. So you don't want any glue coming out in excess. Otherwise you'll have to wash it down with a wet rag to get rid of it, because the glue itself, it will fill the grain, and when it goes off, it will show up underneath the stain as a dirty mark along the joint. So you want to make sure that you don't put too much glue on, just enough to bring the two together, rather than try and fill gaps that you left. Right, so now do the other end. You can appreciate the speed with which you can do this and the accuracy, so you'll always have a nice flush joint. Like that. Right. Clamp it together, and that line is nice and flush because it's set at the same height every time. And then you've got a wider board. You can join multiple pieces together to get the width of a table like this if you want to make it out of solid timber, and biscuit them all together, and it gives a better effect or result rather than using old-fashioned dowels. So this is a blessing to the cabinet making trade, and very accurate, and saves a lot of time doing it right. You want to get one of these if you're doing woodwork at home, and it's not that expensive because it's become very fashionable amongst tradies to build furniture. This thing was nearly $1,000 when it first came out in the 80s. In those days that was 3 weeks' wages, and I wasn't surprised when it grew legs and disappeared because some bloke thought it was a great machine that he'd like to take home. So that's what they call biscuiting as opposed to dowling.